Tell us about this huge proliferation of the entrepreneurship culture in India.
It's happening possibly because we are, as a country, identifying people problems.
It's a very positive direction that at least people have awakened to this new world of trying to identify problems. But I think problems also can come from deep experience.
India has a culture. Aggregate culture of India does not encourage entrepreneurship. Am I right? Am I wrong? Have we now arrived at a juncture that the culture will change in our country?
Very own traditional business is now finding the new digital avatar to itself.
Hello friends, welcome back to Be Cubed, Breaking Boundaries with Sabeer Bhatia. And today, for this episode, we are going to discuss a very important subject, entrepreneurship in India, related to India. For this, we have a very special guest, Aaquib Hussain. He is the founding partner at Free Flow Ventures, angel investor, national venture building partner, TEDx speaker, a research scholar, co-founder of 15 startups with major industry projects for none less than Google and IBM, and has impacted almost 364 startups via venture building. Number of exits achieved so far within a short span of 42 months is 50. So very well done, Aaquib, and welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Who better than you to answer, to interface us on entrepreneurship in India? So tell us about this huge proliferation of the entrepreneurship culture in India. It's recent, but it's really happening.
For sure. And it's really happening is the phrase possibly. That entrepreneurship in the country as a phenomenon, as an activity, and as a choice has kind of broken barriers of what we call the past. But sometimes talking about it takes us back to the reason of why is it happening. It's happening possibly because we are, as a country, identifying people problems. We are, as a country, on the verge of now discussing junctions of where can we actually solve rather than complain, and where can we actually address rather than be full of queries, which used to be our other way around spirit. And it's not a young man's game as it's painted out to be otherwise. And this is something that I discovered through the various examples of experiences that you just gave. Went through so many of these campuses across the country and asked them this one simple question: who is an entrepreneur to you? What is a startup to you? And all of these people, and there would be more than 38,000 plus people who would have reverted to this question in person. And they would come up with all funky answers, the answers of the season, I'm Elon Musk, the answers of the evergreen India, that I'm Jugadu, the answer of saying I'm my own boss, I don't want to wear somebody else's tie, and so on and so forth. And a very small microscopic minority of this particular audience would tell us, we are people who have the eye for people's problem. That's where the country is changing. Our ability to understand a problem around ourselves, for ourselves, in our neighborhood, and possibly taking it to that next scale. When do you multiply from yourself to the better good of the society? That is where the transitions are possibly happening. And that's why we are entrepreneuring right now.
Sabeer, how would you respond?
No, I think that's a very good phenomenon. It's a very positive direction that at least people have awakened to this new world of trying to identify problems. But I think problems also can come from deep experience in some area. Like if you are, for example, working as a mechanic, on a car, and you find some knee pads that help you, get under the car. In America, the culture is let's invent the most ideal knee pad so that every mechanic in America can make use of this. Or, for example, I'm an avid cyclist, and somebody discovers a way to ensure that the chain does not fall off, and it may be a very small invention, but that person becomes a multimillionaire because of the scale of and the whole system is I think set up to enable such kind of innovations, which is done only by getting your hands dirty. A lot of what you're telling me is aspirational, but it is not backed by true experience, because a lot of us don't. I mean, even when I was going to engineering college over here, I was not taught to work with my hands. I couldn't solve a problem, which required me to get my hands dirty. I mean, I was theoretical, fantastic in math, physics, all the second order differential equations, this, that, everything. But then only when I went to America, I learned, that you have to work with your own hands to understand two problems, identify them, and then go ahead and solve them.
And that is where, Sabeer, possibly the element of change is happening here too, in the sense that when I say it's a personal itch from which the first solution is coming in, you're not just thinking about the greater good and the greater solution and the aspirational values that you can set. You're actually finding what's making my life a little more easier, a little more sustainable, if that's the word in the fray right now, and a little more engagement worthy with regards my own products, the things that I'm surrounded by, the solutions that I see, and so on and so forth. And we see that happening very early in colleges nowadays. We are seeing that happening across incubation centers and acceleration ecosystems in the country. So getting hands dirty and getting down there and getting it dirty is a lesson of phrasing that I'll pick up from you, but it's something that my ecosystem and our ecosystem is already into. They are thinking and they are doing stuff which directly implicates a change to their imminent being. So it starts at personal itches, but it possibly ends at some kind of a crystal ball, which gives them the aspiration. So that's the journey for them.
How much does the market support them? And of course, when I say that, I mean the US is a consumer society. So, people are used to paying for services. For example, grocery delivery, right, in the US, which is Zomato is trying to obviously copy it over here, but I'm not sure if the model works just as well over here, because over there people are used to tipping. So, for example, when I ordered $100 of groceries, I'm expected to tip $20 to the person, and that is, pays for that person's gas, his car maintenance, and if he does, 20 trips in a day, he can make, $300-400. Now, the same thing, the economics just break down over here because, labor is cheap. I mean, this grocery delivery is not a new concept. When I was growing up, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago over here, my mom used to pick up the phone and call the neighborhood grocer and say, I need eggs, butter, milk, XYZ, whatever. And, he would have a person just deliver it, and we would settle the bill every month. So in some form, it already existed. Now, to say all of a sudden, because a model that did not exist in the West, that has worked brilliantly over there, that we can just simply copy and say it's the same thing, then we are just copying. We are not doing something groundbreaking and new. And like we had this discussion earlier, we're just servicing 10% of the Indian population. Now we are not solving local problems with critical thinking and fundamental solutions.
So to zoom in a little, what are some of the problems that the new Indian startups are solving? Some examples of that, please.
Yeah, that'd be very good.
For sure. And I'll pick it up from both the pieces. So absolutely agree and acknowledge the fact that our maturity curve as an ecosystem has gone through a lot of what is within double quotes called Me Too models. Models that have essentially seen the light of the day in some other geography on the globe, has a validated venture capital exposure to it. can't necessarily put the founder or the core team onto the stand and ask them, why did you do something that was already existing? Because of the simple fact that it found faster validation, it found faster acceptance, and it found them that fame, which eventually has resulted in us having this particular conversation about the Indian ecosystem, for good or for bad, and it will have both of its aspects in it. And I'm a great believer in the fact that in the last 15 years of the active startupping in India, if I can call it that, between 2008 to 2023-24, we have been doing 93% of the models that are primarily India 1 models. And I borrow this from the great Kishore Biani, who kind of coined this India 1, India 2, India 3 theory, wherein your India 1 is everybody who owns a credit card and pays on time. Your India 2 is that 27% which caters the bills for him. The grocery wala who used to come to your house and complete your chores, run your errands, and so on and so forth. Aspirational enough just to find his ends to meet. And then there's that India 3 that still lives on government support. And that's a major chunk of our country, 65 to 70% of the country. So we are talking about a majority of 1,27,432 startups that the DPIIT calls out today to be serving up to the needs and whims and fancies of a very small minority of paying parity in the country. So that is an agreed upon scenario. But what makes it very, very interesting as an opportunity, Yunisab, is where are we headed? Where are the next set of solutions coming from? Where are the next ideators coming from? They're coming from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 India, who were not primarily exposed to the Silicon Valley realities. They've had YouTube at their access for the last 10 years, but they've not necessarily used it to know which model works best when I present it on a screen or when I put it on a stage. They're working for the solution that is the itch. They're working for the problem that they see in and around the community. They're working for ESG. They're working for sustainable water. They're working for scenarios wherein they can automate their own processes on financing. They're working on rural bottom-up credit because a lot of MSMEs and a lot of SMEs in India don't have access to credit because there's no data. And you can't provide them banking credit, and then they can't run their businesses. And then the country wants it, and the policies want all of us to go digital. So the digital transformation, the ability to access problems in your vicinity, experience them firsthand, have improved their ability to come with very, very connected to ground solutions. And in centers like Gwalior, centers like Patna, Jamshedpur, Guwahati, Kozhikode, Mysore are your startup hubs right now. And I am quoting something that's controversial. The Bangaloreans won't like it, the Gurgaon folks won't like it, and possibly the Mumbaikar entrepreneur will be like, I am sitting in the financial hub of the country. Why are you saying Gwalior is going to bring me the next? Because they are exposed to more heterogeneity of solutioning. They are exposed to more acceptance and failures. And they are a little more tenacious and resilient in taking a no. Always believed as a country, we've kind of grown to this idea that we have started understanding the idea of taking a no. And this whole construct of entrepreneurship globally, and Sabeer, correct me if I'm wrong, is driven and designed in a way that every stakeholder who exists has a default answer called no. And you as the hero, the founder, has to turn those configurations into a yes. The resilience that a tier 2, tier 3 founder has in a lot of these areas, health services, penetrating the last mile in the country. Groceries, but groceries done to pin codes which are not mainstream, which do not have warehouses. So those would be the primary areas that are at work. And we are looking at logistics, we are looking at cold chain, we are looking at sustainable travel, mobility as growing areas in the country. So those would be the kind of industries.
So yours is an economic view. I mean, what we've heard from you, absolutely, perfect. I mean, in the sense that you're looking at it from an economic point of view. Now, let's get to the culture. India has a culture. The aggregate culture of India does not encourage entrepreneurship. Am I right? Am I wrong? Only one word, and then I will complete my. Yeah. So, what India encourages is traditional careers. What India encourages is small businesses. Businesses, not enterprises in that sense. What do you think? How is now, has we arrived at a juncture, seeing the proliferation of entrepreneurship, have we now arrived at a juncture that the culture will change in our country?
I won't say it will happen in the next 2 years or 3 years on a mass scale, but the journey has started. And I'll be super optimistic about it because my days and nights are spent on making this happen, and not just in the more susceptible areas, but in the more offbeat areas of the country, which do not necessarily have it as a natural culture, as you put it right now. What I find very exciting about these founding bases that are getting developed is that very own traditional business is now finding the new digital avatar to itself. The very own practices which they were having from their own legacy setups are now finding questions of why isn't it efficient enough? Why isn't it automated enough? Why isn't it reaching me at a convenience? Why don't I have options? The best part to this universe that's happening, and this part of the world is going to be the engine for all your IPs. Take that from me for the next 2 decades. Is thinking convenience, options, and precision. It's thinking convenience, options, and personalization also. So when a whole mass starts thinking about that, how can you personalize a result to me? How can you give me options in that universe? And how can you make it convenient to access? You have started talking about something more than traditional. You have already started talking about things that are beyond the ordinary. And then the one aspect that why are families still so protected about the fact that get into a traditional career, get into a traditional volume of creating business in a very legacy first manner, for the sheer reason that the country still has issues at the bottom line. It still has economic and aspirational issues. The first thing that we started with, am I talking too aspirational, and is the country too first principles right now? We are somewhere in between. We are traversing our journey. We are taking those first steps. We are getting our ecosystems in a much more hyper-local manner now. So the ecosystems of supports are available now. If a kid wants to drop out of school, it's no more as much a bavander, if I can call it that, in the Hindi slangs of the heartlands that it uses. It's no more a bavander. It's like beta धंधा करेगा. अभी तक वो enterprise नहीं हुआ है. The enterprise journey transition hasn't happened, but the dhanda logic has seeped in. That possibly focusing on that UPSC aspiration or getting into that law conundrum or getting through that engineering entrance is slowly but steadily finding its way out from the mainstream culture. Being an entrepreneur at 12 is cool. Being somebody who has raised cash at 15 is mind blowing, and being an ideator who has 15 patents to him at 18 is possible. So cool, ideal, and possible are happening in India right now. So I'm full of hope about how our markets are growing, and this is because of demand. This is because of a very different kind of consumerism. It is not the US state of consumerism that we are talking about. It is a consumerism that is driven by numbers and needs. It is a consumerism that is driven by cross exchange. You need to forward integrate. You need to get your backward logics connected. You're building for logistics, you need to think EV. You're building for deliveries, you need to think warehouses. So they're connecting the dots much better than Western markets, for the sheer reason that we are so many in number.
I like your sense of optimism, it's very encouraging. Actually, your sense of optimism is very enterprising. Sabeer.
No, I think, like I said, fantastic in terms of, what is possible. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty of things, and I have seen both systems, cultures, the one advantage is all of US society and business processes are structured very logically, where everybody can play their part. So every town is organized similarly.
True.
Right? Similar kind of retail options. For example, when you look at how Uber succeeded, They said, you know what, if we solve it in one small city,
Then it
you know,
blows up.
every other city has exactly similar, there is no localization effort for every city or town. You do it for one, you do it. So everybody who does anything in the US, naturally, because of how society is structured, gets scale.
True.
Right? So you don't have to go and build the raw infrastructure
At all.
at all the
touchpoints.
places. For example, you come up with one device that can save, for example, if you're drilling, you're a neurosurgeon and you have to do a drill that drills somebody's brain. I met this one company that just spent 7 years, getting all the FDA approvals to change it from a hand-driven kind of process to an automatic process, and they have a couple of patents where it automatically stops.
Okay.
Where it doesn't damage the layer right underneath. 7 years, but after 7 years, now when they start getting adopted, they will scale like infinity, right? Whereas over here, it's like a whole, every hospital you have to sell to, every small, so the society is not structured for scale.
Okay.
It's still like a hodgepodge, just like our roads.
Okay.
Like,
right.
you try getting to this place around, there is like everything is a mix match. There is no proper, original planning which you can build upon and then build more upon. And some other entrepreneur does something and somebody else does something, and everybody gets scale right away. That's one huge drawback that I see in the Indian ecosystem. And the other is about specialization. An entrepreneur has to try to do everything from building this over there. Everything is taking place. You just focus on just one thing, and you may spend 7 years doing it. You may spend 20 years doing it, but when that succeeds, boom, you've got a market that you don't have to spend too much. Then it just naturally scales. That, I think, that kind of thinking we need to still embrace, where people over here try to get into each other's businesses also. Like, you try to sell a solution to a big company, first thing is they try to copy it and see if they can do it cheaper.
Right.
I mean, that does not happen in the US.
That we have kind of learned from our more industrious and eminent neighbors. We were just trying to emanate that particular logic, but taking a cue, and if I'm allowed, there is a contrarian view to this that I have, and this is a global perspective, because we have had founders with whom we have sold in Australia, we have sold in Europe, we have sold in GCC, we've sold in the States, services, products, propositions, health propositions, robotic propositions, and all of that. What we've understood is if you've cracked India, you crack the world. Because you get the decentralization capacity on understanding that when audiences change, when every 50 kilometer responds to you in a different light, and when you need to find your way through bureaucracy, through the structures, through the approvals, you've attained a level of resilience that's unimaginably important as a founder, because it gives you the resilience to keep building for various markets.
But that's just one axis.
That is one axis. And
that's not the only axis.
It isn't.
And like over here, everything they think, Indian founders think that if you do something cheaper, the whole world will buy it magically. No.
That's not the case, I hope, anymore. That was the case, and I am absolutely okay to accept the fact that even when we were selling SaaS, or even when we were taking in low-cost deep tech to the world, which wasn't necessarily deep tech, we were doing it with a sense of not owning up to what we have actually done. It's known to a certain degree that the last layer that you have written has been picked up by somebody else. So that was an understanding. But when you pick up a very core problem that's repeating itself in 20 other geographies globally, the TAM in itself is so huge. in the country, and TAM primarily, to everybody who's hearing this, is total addressable market of that particular solution, is so huge that if you can decentralize yet have the ability to maintain a certain level of continuity, a certain level of SOP in your solution, a systematic operating procedure in how you are being able to get to that next iteration of your product, get to that next iteration of knowing who your next market would be. I have a very interesting theory on this, and it may be right, wrong, I've just planted it to the world, that the world fell in love with the acronym FAB. And FAB stood for features, advantages, and benefits. Entrepreneurs built features which had a few advantages to the available ecosystem, and eventually it proved to be beneficial by the time it saw scale. In India, what could be the right approach going forward by the time the culture sets in a real mainstream manner, and by the time we arrive at some structure, I am pretty sure we'll never arrive at the core structure that we are trying to ape from more evolved markets. We will develop our own way through this disruption and this chaos. But we have inverted that particular fab, and it does not sound fab enough to us. We think benefits first, we design advantages next, and features will take care of themselves. Because product is a function of time, the brands that we build will be the function of emotions that we want to recall. And as a country, we recall emotions a lot. We have a continuity to get to paying for emotional recall. And we have so many of those examples. They might not have scaled themselves as startups, but the Amul story now is very much in the States for a certain reason. It has reached States it has taken them 37 years to be there, but they're now there, and they're possibly selling more than any other available gourmet product, or for that matter of fact, dairy product in the universe that is called the United States of America. And for the sheer reason,
Who told you that?
there is data on that.
No.
There's a very imminent data right now.
No, see, these kind of stories are, it's like overblowing your trumpet.
For sure.
It
for
is,
sure.
and
Agreed.
when you look at the data, it is nowhere close to the distribution of the largest dairy producer in the United States.
Producer, yes. For the time that they've existed in the market, to the scale and momentum that they've
See,
achieved.
once
That's a
again.
comparison.
I'm
And
very
now,
intrigued
now
by.
it's like, see, this is
Yeah.
India has to learn how to play its hand with humility, and that is one thing that is lacking,
Agreed.
and that is responsible for the consistent missteps, failures, because they're like, oh, Amul is there. Oh my God, it's there. Listen, the local dairy producer in Sonoma distributes more than Amul for the last 100 years.
For sure.
So now to say, oh, this is our story, fantastic, it makes for news. We're not selling anything. We have to learn. And first thing we have to learn is humility. And if we do that, India can progress at 30 times that it is progressing today.
For sure.
The problem is this over arrogance. We are there. We have arrived. We are nowhere close.
We are still
when
in
you look at
transition.
our software industry over here, to be honest with you, it's still stuck in the behemoths, TCS, and they're still just doing body shopping. They're not producing original core product. And we have to learn. Once we learn from how the Western mind thinks and how it cracks problems, that's when we will create the next Canva or the next Figma out of India. We still are nowhere close to that scale. And that is what I think comes from teaching our children critical thinking. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with Showreel, to try to teach them, just hold your horses. Don't think you've already arrived. Always be humble. The Japanese are always humble and they always win. I mean, even in the case of this Tesla EV car, they saw it way before anybody else that hydrogen was the right solution. And they just lied low for 20 years, and now the world is waking up to the reality that that's the right way to
And they're
go.
leading it. True.
So we have to learn. First thing is humility. And when we do that, then we'll be able to convert all of the intellectual horsepower that we have into real economic advantage.
Got it.
No, that's good. Actually, sometimes humility is obviously is obviously a virtue and it must prevail. And I think that is anything you need to serve up to the world, it has to be with humility. But there also has to be, Saveer, a reasonable amount of confidence in which we move ahead. And confidence must never be mistaken for lack of humility. That's the other side of it. Now, having said that, it's a very strange thing. It's a bit paradoxical that a country like India, where the spirit of entrepreneurship is imbued so deeply, where the culture of Jugaad was born, and Jugaad is such a huge thing in this country.
To our everyday living.
Any small little mechanic can do some Jugaad and turn it into a product. So, in a country like this, why, I mean, it only intrigues me why people are so status quoist. Why do they not, dynamically move to the real culture of entrepreneurship? Why are we still hung up on sending our children to civil services, making them doctors and engineers and lawyers? Why can we not encourage our children to become entrepreneurs? And therefore, my next point is, should entrepreneurship be promoted in homes, in schools, and in larger social systems?
It has to start at homes, for sure, and it has to start with the belief of the fact that your kid has the ability of turning that no into a yes. The default configuration that the world will throw at you, that you're not ready, you're not good enough, or you're not different enough to actually produce what you're talking about or ideate through what you are actually disrupting as a kid. If you are not given that particular push by the first barrier to every risk that you can take in life, which is possibly the family. And to your question, the paradox lies in the construct that you do. The mechanic who has that ability to be the jugadu essentially is not necessarily baseline supported on his economics. His economics of being a mechanic is not adding up. So he's wanting a better life, a better purpose, a better definition, a better layer of stability for that next generation that he's sending to schools even now, or to the brick and mortar ecosystems that he still puts his belief in. That college is going to get him the degree of reverence from the world, because he possibly did not have that access in his own generation. So that transition is happening. A lot of blue and gray gigs have actually turned into industries by themselves, and their next generations have understood that there's a lot of play in what my father was doing, and he just wasn't looking at the scale that it could achieve. And scale is where they solve. Scale is where they see newer markets. So it is a transitionary phase, and with the unit transaction currency with us being humility, the humility transaction currency actually lives within these constructs, that you are made humble on a daily basis with respect to the number of rejections that you face at each layer of where you want the support to come at, whether it be the family, whether it be the institution, or whether it be the community at large. Now, what is being done to do away with it is where lovely things are panning up. There are very interesting tinkering labs that are entering public schools now, not just the fancy private schools that used to exist in the country for a while, but public schools having tinkering labs, which allows the unit kid, if you have an idea, give it shape. Get your hands dirty, as we said at the onset. Get your hands dirty by building what you're talking about. Just don't give me the fakuzi around what's possible, but build it. Give me a shape. It might fail in its first iteration. We are okay to take it. Unfortunately, fail in India does not stand for abhi tak. It does not stand for first attempt at learning. It's still not an acronym that we kind of align to. But there are entrepreneurial academies that are entering a stream wherein programs and initiatives like yours can add a lot of value, wherein they're entering at an early stage education level for the kid. It's becoming not just a credit area now, it's becoming an area of merit. And schools, colleges, incubation setups are pushing it forward. There is cash available. There is cash available to support meritocracy. There is cash available to build these younger models forward and build forward for first your hyper-local requirements and then the global scale that the product can achieve. So that's there.
So that's great. Good to hear all this, and wonderful that this subject could be discussed in between two people. One is an iconic entrepreneur, and one is an amazing entrepreneur such as yourself, and you're proving it on a day-to-day basis. So thank you, gentlemen, very much. Friends, if you have any questions for Aaquib and for Sabeer, please feel free to send those questions by downloading our app, BCube Tutorial app from App Store or Play Store, and putting your questions on the app. I'm sure the gentleman will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you for watching. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.